Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to Perspective with me, Julie Ali. On the show today, we're going to be talking to Advocate Robin Sewlal. He's based in KZN. He is the chairperson of Radiocracy that compromises radio, democracy and development. He serves as an advisor, consultant, editor, strategist and trainer for various entities. In addition, Robin is a judge for the prestigious Vodacom Journalist of the Year competition, the South African Film and Television Awards, and also the United Kingdom Community Radio Awards. He is a member of the Public Sector Audit Committee Forum and honorary member of the Golden Key International Society. And he's on the show with us this morning to talk about his latest and possibly his pet project. But we will first talk about all of the other work he's been involved in, and then we will talk about Radiocracy and that, of course, 100 years of radio in South Africa. Robin Sewlal, a very good morning to you. Welcome to the program.
Good morning to you, Julie, and thank you for the opportunity. Great to be here.
Lovely to have you here. Now let's start off talking about, firstly, you've had extensive experience in the journalism field. You have freelance for both print and electronic media. So let's talk about all of your experiences. I mean, you are a advocate by profession, and yet you've veered into journalism and print media. Why the change in probably career paths?
Well, Julie, the truth be told, I got into academia by default. When I was serving my articles with the firm of attorneys in Durban, the ML Sultan Technikon was looking for a company law lecturer. And I applied, not expecting any positive news to come out of it. And as it turned out, I, in a sense, was interviewed. The interview, I'm calling it an interview very loosely. It was a conversation. And when I asked the gentleman who was then the acting deputy vice chancellor, he said, well, you start in 5 minutes' time. Here's the key to your venue. And that was it. And one thing led to another. This was with the Law and Administration Department at the ML Sultan Technikon. And as it turned out, journalism was beginning in the Technikon as well. And I was offered a job. I took the contract for a year, and that became permanent. In a sense, I was getting the best of both worlds, both the legal aspects as well as broadcasting.
So then you also had a tenure at the Broadcasting Complaints Commission of South Africa. That body has always interested me because I've been in this space for many, many years. And I kind of wonder regarding the do's and don'ts and not to come foul of the BCCSA. Do they get many complaints from the public, and what sort of complaints come through and how are they resolved? I'm aware of this situation because I am in the space of media, and I kind of wonder, do you come across or in the time when you were with the BCCSA, have you come across very many serious cases, and how do they get resolved? Are there situations like expensive, costly legal fees involved? Do settlements have to be negotiated in situations like this? What are the do's and don'ts as far as the BCCSA is concerned?
Julie, let me say up front, the BCCSA is not only there to protect viewers as well as listeners, it's there to protect broadcasters as well. So when I was involved with the commission, our sense was, how can we find a settlement? How can we find whereby the listener as well as the broadcaster come to an understanding of what they have done wrong, if they have done wrong? And more often than not, the complaint, in a sense, is not that serious. And the broadcaster accepts that they've obviously crossed the line, and they will make good. But yes, to answer your question about serious cases, there have been some serious cases, and one of the cases I think about, um, it was the SABC that showed the family members of an AIDS victim. And when I say family members, there were also kids involved. And I found that quite serious. And the truth of the matter is that when you ask for an apology, are you kind of exposing those family again? And those are the kind of the tricky situations that one gets into. How do you correct that? When you ask for an apology, do you show pictures on television? As you know, with television, pictures paint the picture. And so the point of the matter here is that, yes, there are serious cases, but more often than not, listeners as well as viewers will complain about non-material issues. They just want to be heard. And I found that to be the case more often than not.
Can you give us some examples of the type of issues that are raised by viewers and listeners? And do you find that in this day and age, both the broadcaster and the viewer or listener is protected by the POPI Act if people do realize the seriousness of the POPI Act? And because that act is in place, do you find there are less complaints, and the complaints are really not serious enough to even possibly merit a hearing?
Well, in a sense, the POPI Act has not been embraced, if I may use that word, by the entire population. And so the complaints will come in thick and fast. The POPI Act has an effect on the complaints, but not as much as I thought it would be. But the point we need to actually appreciate when we talk about the kind of cases that you ask about, we've had complaints about the violence on television. Hate speech is such a issue in our country. The issue of racism, discrimination. It's also sometimes it's not what you say on radio, it's how you say it, and people feel offended by that. I would argue it's about context. When you broadcast, whether on radio and television, do you provide context so that the viewer and the listener understand where you're coming from? And I find that to be one of the main issues that actually governs complaints and the solution to those complaints.
I'm wondering about this day and age where when you watch series and movies on TV, very especially as a family, and even though there is an overrider disclaimer where you are warned that the material that you're going to be watching is of an explicit nature. It might be violence, drug use, and explicit sexual content. That is so freely available and so freely rebroadcast. And yet I believe not enough noise is made about those type of situations.
You hit the nail on the head, about explicit sex scenes. And so what, and it's my observation, what broadcasters used to do will promote a movie that has sexual content before the watershed period. And so somebody who's a youngster, a minor, may I put it that way, would probably say, wow, you know what, I saw the promo, I need to watch the movie. And he's been kind of alerted to that movie, and he will stay up late at night, whether it's 11 or 12 at night, to watch that movie. So that's where the broadcaster kind of, in a sense, reached the code of conduct. But in a sense, the explicit nature of movies and documentaries, etc., to find a solution. You know your child, you know your son, you know your daughter well, you police it and you monitor the behavior and the viewing habits.
So once again, that's all left to the parents or the guardians to monitor and make sure that you're not exposing your children to material that is not is very sensitive and sexually explicit. But having said that, we're going to talk more about your radio memories, the previous book you've written, your time at Capital Radio, and much, much more. But time for us to go for our first ad break. Welcome back. This is Perspective with me, Julie Ali. My guest is Robin Sewlal. He's here to talk to us about his book, My Radio Memory. But before we get to that, there's so much more to unpack with this amazing advocate who has his heart firmly placed in media, both print and broadcast media. Welcome back to you, Robin, and I'd like you to share memories with us regarding your time spent at Capital Radio.
Such fond memories, Julie. I mean, Capital Radio really put me on the map as far as radio is concerned. It was not just the station, but the personalities that were involved with radio at that stage. You know, many of them are now late. For example, Kevin Savage, Jim Ellery, Jeremy Mansfield, Oscar Renzi. I must admit, I learned more on Capital Radio about radio than from books and papers and journals. And as you know, I spent a lot of time in academia. But Capital Radio was really the place where I learned a lot about good radio and how to kind of get programming done. But how to connect with the listener. And it's as early as my days on Capital, I got to learn very quickly the listener is key. You know, we talk about, beauty is in the eye of the beholder. I learned when I was on Capital Radio, the power and beauty of radio is in the ear of the beholder. And so, you know, I'm really grateful for my experience at Capital. And the kind of show that I was doing on Capital was giving our local artists an opportunity to shine. And that's where I connected with the likes of Sipho Hotstix Mabuse, Ray Peary, Claire Johnson, Wendy Oldfield, Madala Kunene, Melvin Peters, Neil Solomon. The list goes on and on and on. But really, really great days. And I wish I could have those days again.
What they also say about radio is that it's the theatre of the mind. Unlike a television, it doesn't really allow you to get the mind working, does it? So radio really, when you listen into a drama or a story being told on radio, it does get the mind to start making pictures, and the most amazing pictures that I don't think you'd be able to conjure anywhere else in any way, in any other way or form.
In a sense, you know, when you watch television, the pictures are controlled by the box. You don't imagine anything beyond what you are seeing. However, radio has a cinematic feel to that. And I've often argued, and I still do argue, that there's a strong complementary relationship between radio and the other media platforms. For example, radio comes from the print media, whether it's a short story, whether it's a documentary, whether it's a play. We spoke about the pictures that you paint in your mind, and that's where the element of the small/big screen comes in. When you talk about digital media, as you're well aware, radio is available on streaming services. And lo and behold, still photography still plays a major part in our appreciation of pictures in a universal sense.
You've had quite an illustrious career up to now, but there was a time in your life when you edited several publications, including 3 books on Bollywood. Then also the Corporate Governance Toolkit for the MDDA and Inspirations in celebration of South Africa's 20 years of freedom and democracy. And that, of course, reflections of South African media from the year 1994 to 2019. This was released on Madiba Day 2021. And of course, the foreword was penned by former senior anchor, that is Jeremy Thompson at Sky News. And I used to follow him, brilliant presenter. So that was quite an accolade, was it not, as far as all of these, all of these awards and acknowledgements are concerned. Can you take us through those three individually and talk about your memories and what you learned from the interactions with your three books on, well, you didn't write them, but you edited them, your three books on Bollywood, then of course, Reflections of the South African Media and your corporate governance toolkit as well. A lot of learning must have happened for you, and how did you pass all of that down to the benefit of the viewer and the listener?
When we talk about the Bollywood books, the 150, the 250, and the 500 Bollywood encounters, a true story. Fakir Hussain, who published these books, was the editor of these books, or should I say, who wrote these books, and I edited them, and I also wrote the foreword for these books. Fakir Hussain used to represent SABC at the BCCSA, and we were friends for many years. And so after one inquiry, one tribunal, Fakir says, "Come, Robin, let's have lunch." And I said, "No, Fakir, it's fine." But I realized he had something up his sleeve. And during lunch, he tells me about this 150 Bollywood encounters, which coincided with the anniversary of the arrival of indentured laborers from India. And so we chatted, and he was telling me about this book, and I was listening to him, not very attentively, mind you. The food was good anyway. But he tells me thereafter, "But Robin, I need to speak with you because I want you to edit the book." And I said, "Fakir, but I don't have much time." But he says, "No, you can do it. Give a busy man something to do, and he'll get it done for you." And that's how it started. And that book, the first book, mind you, was edited on planes, at airports, whether I was in a hotel room, whether on the flight, whatever the case may be. And so that's how the book came about. But, in terms of the learning, I learned at that stage that Bollywood was absolutely massive. It was huge. And when the book did come out, it went in double quick time. And so Fakir calls me. The book probably went in about 6 weeks, 1,000 of those books. And Fakir called me and says, "Robin, can we do a reprint?" And I said to him, "Do you want to do a reprint, or do you have more stories that we can include in another edition of Bollywood Encounters?" And he says, "Yes, I do." And so that's when 250 Bollywood Encounters was conceived and created. Yeah, I mean, a wonderful journey,
Sure. Just as a matter of interest, did these books ever reach Bollywood, those big producers in Bollywood, or the actors and actresses themselves? And did you get any feedback from them regarding these books?
Very good question, Julie. I mean, to be honest with you, I was even surprised that people in Bollywood got to know who I was. And the book did get to them, with friends in India, through Fakir's friends, to my friends. A friend of mine owns a hair salon in Mumbai, and she was doing the work for the actors and the actresses doing the hair before movies. And so I sent a bunch of books through her dad, and those books were snapped up by these actors and actresses. And yes, I do have contact with some of them as we speak. Yeah, I mean, and they were very pleased, in as much as they get so much of publicity, whether through newspapers, whether through the movies, whether through books, they like to see the face in a book or the name in print. And yeah, the feedback was very, very positive, I may add.
In all of the work that you've done over the years in print media, in editing, in the collaborations that you've had with people like Fakir Hussain and others, what stands out for you the most? And then added to that question, we're talking about your radio memory, we're talking about 100 years of radio, but you also say that there are other organizations in the country which also celebrated 100 years in the year 2023. So do respond to both those questions, please.
Well, you know, the Bollywood encounters, you know, kind of in a sense gave me the confidence to kind of do a book. As you know, I grew up radio. Radio was my passion, still is my passion. I always had the intellectual curiosity when it came to radio. But in a sense, the Bollywood books prompted me to kind of engage with more publications. So 2019 came about, 25 years of our democracy. And I said to myself, you know, I need to do something to kind of celebrate 25 years and you know, stay in your lane, so to speak. And, you know, my lane was the media industry. And when I was at the Durban University of Technology, I kind of reached out to people who had contact with me, whether as a part-time lecturer, whether as a former student of mine, whether the university has given the individual honorary professorship. Each and every person who contributed to the book, I've got 40 chapters in the book, had some contact with DUT journalism at that stage. Whether it was an Anand Singh or a Jeremy Maggs or Fred Kumalo or Yuveka Rangappa, you know, they wrote stories and I covered, if I may humbly say this, the full gamut of media in the country. Whether it was community radio, commercial radio, the SABC, the print media, consumer journalism, and the movies, because the movies also play a part in promoting, you know, information, education, and entertainment. And Anand Singh had written that piece. So, you know, and Jeremy Thompson, who wrote the foreword, was very magnanimous. And a quick anecdote.
Okay, can you hold that, please? Please hold that. We've got to go for our next ad break. We will respond to that right after. Welcome back. I'm talking with Robin Sewlal. He's here to talk about his radio memory. It's a book he's written. We've got about, I'd say, 50 minutes left with this interview, so we'll try and cram in as much as we possibly can. I'll allow you to finish your thought just before the ad break, and then we can continue the discussion.
A quick anecdote about Jeremy Thompson, who penned the foreword for Reflections of the South African Media, 1994 to 2019. When Madiba passed away in 2013, I did a 2-hour program on Madiba on community radio. And the radio station, Radio Hinvani, had given me the full authority to speak to whoever I want around the world. And Jeremy Thompson was in Johannesburg, and at that stage he was with Sky News. It was the weekend of the funeral of Madiba. And Jeremy said, Robin, thank you for the invite. I'd love to be on your show. I know your show is live. Unfortunately, I'm also live on Sky News, and we made this clash. And you know, he was very, very kind to me and courteous to me. And he says, you know, I owe you one, and whenever you need my assistance, please reach out. So when I put together Reflections of the South African Media, I reached out to Jeremy Thompson, and Jeremy asked me 2 questions. How long do you want it, and when do you want it? And I said, Jeremy, you know, you could take 2-3 weeks, maybe 500-600 words. And mind you, Julie, within 24 hours, Jeremy had penned his forward and sent it to me. And I was absolutely humbled and touched by his professionalism and him acceding to my request to pen the forward. And so, yeah, that's the 2019, the 1994-2019 book, which was, like you said, launched on Madiba Day 2021.
Okay, there's so much more I'd like to unpack on all of those amazing experiences of yours, but let's get to the heart of the matter, and that, of course, is My Radio Memory, the book that you have written. Now, we do know that early days of radio, here in South Africa especially, very especially in the days of apartheid, we were cut off from virtually any form of entertainment, and radio was our mainstay. How big a role do you believe it played in shaping us shaping our futures and future generations?
In response to your question, every South African has listened to radio sometime or the other in this country, whether it was information, whether it was education, whether it was entertainment, prior to 1994 and beyond 1994. You know, I'm just amazed that radio has stood the test of time. Or maybe I should put it this way: I'm not amazed, because radio is a companion. It connects with people. It's an immediate medium. It has a whole range of wonderful attributes. Radio commands a listenership of 34.9 million in South Africa. And that's a tall order, given the competing devices, given the streaming services, given the influx of television channels, given the influx of international television channels in our country. But radio still is the number one go-to platform for news and current affairs. More people around the world tune into radio first thing in the morning.
Okay, and that is simply because of convenience. I mean, you just flick a switch and the radio comes on and you consume whatever news you're wanting to consume for the morning. Whereas with other mediums, like a television screen for that matter, you need to get to the lounge, switch it on and sit and wait for whatever it is that you're wanting to consume. So what you're saying to me, in effect, is that radio is very resilient and it is here to stay. I often wondered about radio, and now with online radio, it just increases the longevity of the life of radio.
No, you're absolutely right. I mean, you don't need a license. You probably know this. You don't need a license to be an online radio station. However, you know, it adds to the attraction, the appeal of radio. And as you know, radio is portable. You can listen to radio at home. You can listen to it in your car. You can listen on the beach. You can listen anywhere. You could be doing your exercises and running, you know, in the park, on the roads or wherever. But you can still listen to radio, and I think that's the beauty of radio. It's accessible. It's available. And at one stage, you probably know this, Julie, better than I do. Some people had a radio in each of their rooms, and that's how connected and that's how the appeal, the magnetic appeal of radio is. And so radio is here to stay for many decades to come, I would say.
And I would also like to add to that, Robin, I think in the dark days of apartheid, that was our only means of entertainment for us as brown and black people in South Africa. We had absolutely nothing else. So radio was the mainstay in our lives. But having said that, we've now graduated, we've moved on, and we are now in the instant age. We are living in the age of instant everything, instant gratification in the global sense. How do you believe radio then serves us as part of the audio ecosystem and the impact? And this is the big question I ask everyone who brings up issues around print media. I've had deep conversations with journalists and editors about print media. Is it going to die out with AI on the scene, and very especially social media that has taken the world by storm?
In a sense, that's a loaded question, but an important question to be answered. You are right. You know, print media is dying off. However, I would say that we still need literacy around the world. And my point is that we need to keep reading. If you read more, you listen better, you write better, you communicate better. And so, you know, it gives meaning to two-way communication between you and I and the rest of us, wherever in the world we are. So that's the one thing. You bring up the issue about competing services, and you bring up the issue of AI. You know, my simple response to the AI issue is that AI is here to stay. You and I can't do anything about AI. as radio people, we need to embrace AI. But I would often argue, and I will argue, so to speak, till the cows come home, that AI cannot replace you and I. It cannot replace the feel that you and I have for radio. And as you're well aware, it's how you make your listener feel. AI can't do that. AI is an efficient way of broadcasting, which will help you to speed up your research and your preparation, but it cannot replace you as a human being, whereby as a human being, you and I are effective. AI is efficient, you and I are effective in what we do. So that's the long and short, I would say. But again, I repeat, we can't ignore AI. It's with us, but it cannot replace us. There's lots of questions about AI, about content. Is it accurate? Is it ethical? These are the questions that is left to the journalist. And like I used to tell my students at DUT, check, double check, and triple check. Go to the source of the information. Don't rely on a news agency or who's phoning you and telling you what's happening. Go to the source. You'll get the most updated information and obviously the correct information, accurate information.
I like that you brought up that point. How do you respond to the fact that globally there's this outcry about media being captured, journalists and editors pushing the narrative of the people who pay them?
You're bringing up a very thorny issue, and justifiably so. And I would say it's all about self-censorship, okay? And we talk about media freedom, as you're well aware, we protect by Section 16 of our Constitution. But the element of self-censorship is a reality of our situation. And it's, in a sense, it's the individual that contributes to his own downfall or the downfall of his publication or radio or television station. So it's a real issue where you self-censor. Yes, you do get external factors that play a part, whether it's big business, whether it's labor, whether it's civil society, but you are the judge. You make what I call an editorial decision to run a story and how you would run the story. You have an editorial responsibility to your audience. And if you don't get it right, your audience will also get it wrong.
And that's where we need to go for another break. We'll be back for our final segment, and we'll be wrapping up with Robin Sewlal with this interview regarding radio, the book that he's written, My Radio Memories. So please do stay with us. Welcome back. Robin Sewlal is my guest. We're talking about his book, My Radio Memory, and the all-important question, what inspired him to write this book and who is it targeted at? Welcome back, Robin, and your response to that question.
Well, in 2022, when I decided in a year's time, South Africa will be celebrating 100 years of radio, which was on the 18th of December, 2023. I said, what's the best way to celebrate the centennial year of radio? And I decided on My Radio Memory, listening to the listener. And I used my friends, my colleagues, and my network of contacts around the country. And I put out a meeting listeners around the country to contribute. And I got 100 listeners to contribute from all walks of life, from around the country, in about all the provinces in our country, from all our provinces. And I was really touched by that. But I said to myself, yes, I read a story from, for example, Ahmed Bawa or Madala Kunene or Albi Modise. But what more can I put in there? So what I did do, though, I put in stories about stations that were on air in South Africa, but I know more. And I got people who are directly involved with these radio stations to pen those pieces on those 12 stations. For example, Stan Katz wrote on Swazi Music Radio. I got Martin Bailey to write on Peace Radio.
and this won't surprise you. Radio Truro was part of the mix as well in my radio memory. And Radio Truro, I well know, is very close to your heart. And where you
Absolutely. I cut my teeth on Radio Truro.
So thank you for that, Julie. And that's whereby, my memory was so kind of clear that I must put Julie in my chapter, and in a sense we've come full circle, whether it's the Ghulam Marjams, the Sunny Bai Budram, Safi Siddiqui, Ketan Lakhani, Logan Govender. They're all in that chapter, and that was written, like I said, by Sakya Ahmed. I also got a piece on Springbok Radio by Lynn Mansfield. I got Capital Radio, Radio Freedom, Radio Marisburg, Radio Phoenix, as well as Classic FM. So yeah, by the way, Radio Bop is also there. LB Modise wrote on Radio Bop. And then I put in other little interesting pieces, historical facts about radio from 1923 to 2023. This day in history, as in December 18th, songs about radio, radio quotations, and, which gave me a bit of fun doing. I put in punchlines from old radio commercials that you and I enjoyed prior to 1984, where people were quite impressed with that.
We've come a long way from way back then. We, as especially the Black community of South Africa, have really made strides in the field of media, radio, print and electronic media. Are you encouraged by that? And do you not feel, in a sense, that it's giving radio a run for its money? What will keep radio real, relevant and authentic?
Well, the beauty about radio is, like I said, time and again, it's a platform to connect with your audience. And there's no better way than connecting with your audience with real radio. When I talk about real radio, have you researched your content? Have you prepared well enough for your show? Are you doing a show or are you doing a shoot? And I think that's critical. Are you there, and dare I say it, are you there just to get back some revenue, or have you prepared? You well know, Julie, a 3-hour show preparation is not half an hour before the show. It'll probably take you half a day or sometimes a whole day for a 3-hour show. And that's preparation. And that's what I find lacking. And real radio comes from full preparation and planning and obviously research. Relevant is, as I keep saying, lead from where your listener is. Think about what your listener wants to hear. It's not what you want to put on radio. It's not what you know. And I often think about it this way. What you don't know is also what the listener doesn't know. And, it's a wonderful opportunity for you to, in inverted commas, educate and inform yourself so you could also be that facilitator of that information and that education for your listener. Authentic, the issues of ethics, like I mentioned earlier on, comes about. How authentic is our content? How real is our content? Does it, in a sense, improve people's lives? Does it make their lives better? Are you saying something that they know about? Or are you telling them something that, yes, they like to know about, but do they need to know about? And, whether it's grants, whether it's about water, electricity, climate change, rhino poaching, the crime issue, potholes, streetlights, etc. Are you giving them relevant information? Are you giving them information so that they could turn to an authority when they have a problem? And when I talk about real, relevant, and authentic radio.
Okay, there is an opportunity, and it probably is happening as you and I speak, is the complementary relationship with other media platforms, print, visual, digital, and of course, more importantly, stills photography, because that too tells a story, does it not?
No, absolutely. The stills picture, I mean, you probably have it. I think all of us have it. If you go into our archives, we've got stills photography from decades back. But the memory through those photographs, black and white. Uh, it's incredible. It really, gets us thinking about where we've come from, what we've done, whether it's a wedding, whether it's an engagement, whether it's a birthday party, whatever we're celebrating. Photographs tell us a story, remind us on where we come from. And so that's why I think, stills photography is going to be here, as I said early on, for decades to come, like radio. You can't replace that. And stills photography is used on digital media, used on the small and the big screen, just to remind us of the past.
Okay, tell us about your book. Where is it available? What is the cost? And have you had positive response to your radio memory, the book, Your Radio Memory, or rather it's entitled My Radio Memory?
Well, it's also your radio memory. When David Gresham wrote my foreword, I said, David, the point of the matter, yes, I may have edited the book, but the book belongs to every South African citizen. And we must make the book as accessible and available as possible. So the book is available through My Radio Memory at radiocracy.co.za, My Radio Memory, one word, at radiocracy.co.za. It retails at $3.90, excluding VAT. However, if you write to My Radio Memory, it will be delivered to you at no extra cost, because Radiocracy has a wonderful relationship with the courier company called Internet Express. However, the book is available in some of the exclusive bookstores and some independent stores around the country. So, if you have a problem reaching out and getting the book, you can drop an email to My Radio Memory at radiocracy.co.za.
Let's wrap up by talking about, in the few minutes that we have left, let's talk about your role at Radiocracy and what exactly is the role of Radiocracy to the general public.
Well, cut a long story short, Radiocracy will be 25 years old next year in South Africa. And when I attended an international conference in 1999, and when I heard radio, which, as I keep saying, is my passion, and linked to democracy and development, I said, what better way to use radio to promote democracy and deepen development in our country? And so I had the international conference in 2001 in South Africa, and lo and behold, it has taken off, like wildfire in our country. It's been popularized, and I kind of, in a sense, brought the concept of Radiocracy into my lectures, into my lessons at DUT to my journalism students, who kind of loved the idea. But as you're well aware, we're still a young democracy. So Radiocracy has got still an important role, as well as to fulfill the different aspects of democracy. In a sense, what is democracy? What is democracy for you is probably different to what I see democracy as. And the conversation with regard to democracy will take place from, in the next decade, in the next couple of decades. And the point of the matter, what are the issues that need development? We talk about information, education, entertainment, but I would like to add development to that. And that's where Radiocracy plays a huge role, and whereby I'm using Radiocracy to promote literacy. I'm using Radiocracy to promote the complementary relationship with the different media platforms, but also using Radiocracy to help the different industries in our country to use radio as a wonderful platform to promote their sector.
Okay, with a half a minute left, Robin, we're going to wrap up. Where to from here for you and your dreams of radio and this medium to carry on for as long as possible?
Well, Julie, this radio journey has been a fascinating journey, and as much as I put the book together, My Radio Memory, it has been fascinating, whereby I've learned so much. I've learned a lot from our colleagues in the industry. I made more friends, built relationships, but I also learned from ordinary citizens, who tell you something that is so simple, but at the same time so profound. And I'm really very thankful for that experience. Where to from here? You know, there's many a person who's speaking to me about different projects, different initiatives. Obviously, I need my radio memory to run its course, so to speak. It's doing well. It's going to go online very shortly. There's a lot of expats who want access to the book, and so it will go online very shortly. But you know, if I may put it this way, and I think
Okay,
it's humbling,
unfortunately,
it's an
Robin, we're
exciting
going
journey.
to have to leave it there. We've run out of time, but thank you for your company on Perspective this morning, right here on Hilaal TV. God bless.
Thank you, Julie. Thank you for the opportunity, and keep well.
And that's our show for today. Thank you indeed for your company. Till the next time, as always, go well. And it is Assalamu alaikum and Khudafiz from me, Julie Ali.